Hello, friend, and welcome back to my studio. So today I'd like to give a little bit of a tutorial on how to paint fabric, and in this case, curtains. I start by blocking in some of the more basic color areas, the lights, the darks. The way that I like to mix my colors is to go to a digital form of the image, a high definition screen, keep the color accuracy as best I can, and select what I would say the main color is. And in this case, it is a mix of olive green, cadmium yellow pale, and titanium. And then from there, I go around the image and I see which kinds of colors are casting onto the fabric. If there's a blue screen, if there's an orange light, if there's a colored blind behind that can reflect some of the color onto the curtains. I look for that kind of thing, and then I take some of my base mix and I add in a couple different shades. So for this, I have a couple different areas of paint. The darker areas, I added in some Payne's Gray for some areas, some burnt umber for a couple areas, and then some ivory black as my darkest. And then for the highlights, I just really went back in with extra white and extra cadmium yellow pale, and some of the highlights I went in with even a tiny dab of ultramarine to give more of a cool color cast. So what I'm doing here is I'm just filling it in, still just going in and picking where the highlights are, picking which shade of highlight it could be, the more yellow shade or the more blue shade, and then going through and blending it in just a little bit. I like to blend one color at a time rather than an area. So here I'm blending the highlights into the midground. I use a few different types of brushes, but I tend to have applying the paint brushes and then blending the paint brushes, and I find a soft bristled brush to work best for my kinds of techniques, and especially best for fabric. Once I've got a basic blend going, I start going back in and developing the shadows. So here I've got my Payne's Gray, my burnt umber, my olive green, and a couple highlights, but I'm really just trying to push the dimension, pull the light forward and push the dark backward. Fabric is one of my favorite things to paint because it's just folds, and folds are just shifts in value of a same color. It is a really good place to really hone in your blending techniques and define how you apply your paint. Because every object is really just highlights and shadows, and fabric especially. Here I'm adding a couple details like the stitches across the top. I'm also trying to give these curtains, this middle panel in specific, a few wrinkles. So I'm going in with a color that's just a shade darker than where I apply it, or when I'm applying to the dark, just a shade lighter, just to give a couple more creases because this is a very wrinkled curtain. Anytime I'm off screen there, I'm trying to mix the exact right shade. Sometimes it's a little too dark and I need the right kind of green mixed in. I wish I had 2 cameras so I could show you my palette as well. Sometimes in fabric, you do get the difficulty of having to shift from the darkest value to the lightest value in a very narrow area of space, and you can see I'm pushing it back and forth a little bit here. It's a little trial and error. It's a little going in and making it darker, then going in and making it lighter until it looks right to the eye. Straight lines are also particularly difficult because of the curve of the wrist. And you can see my curtains are a little on the wavy side, but I think it adds an organic element to it. One hot tip I have is not to overblend the lines between fabric that isn't touching. And by that I mean this curtain here is folded. The outside of the fold should not blend too solidly into the inside, otherwise it doesn't look like it's really moving much. It's more like a crease rather than a fold. Here I am trying to smooth out the line a little bit more. And just making that blend between the highlight and the shadow just a little bit less perfect. It should be not a straight line. It should very much be more of a wavy line to blend in, because that's how the light reflects off of the fabric. And here I go trying to add in a little bit more texture, a little bit more dimension, give some highlights that go more abruptly into the shadows, some shadows that go a little more abruptly into the highlights. This is definitely a step to end with and not start with, and if you do it in the middle, you'll probably end up blending it out. I'm very guilty of putting something on, overblending it, fixing it, putting it back on, maybe overblending it again and starting it over. It tends to look cleanest when you're able to do the fewest steps, for oil paint at least. Just darkening some shadows again, coming in with that black and the green. Sometimes it's hard to get the shadows exactly as dark as they are without muddying the colors, and so in the final image I actually did go over just with a second layer, just once it was all dry, and I just put a little bit of raw umber and walnut oil medium, and I just made those shadows a little bit richer, and once you wait for it to dry, then it doesn't have to blend with the colors. It can lay over top and add some more dimension to it. Painting anything, and painting fabric especially, is all about the push and the pull. It's like water on the beach, carving into sand. One trick I learned very early on is to pay attention to where you're blending. I like to look very acutely, frequently at the image that I'm referencing to make sure, okay, this shadow blends a little up and to the right. It blends a little up and to the right then, and I go and I do that, rather than just assuming this is a shadow, this is a highlight. They blend together smoothly I might end up with a much different form in the end because I didn't pay attention to how the transitions blended together. And here I am adding those wrinkles again, just with a shade lighter, a shade darker. I'm trying to keep it a little bit more rough, a little bit more choppy. Don't want to blend these wrinkles in too much, otherwise they won't really be noticeable. And now I'm going to do the second panel of the curtain, just sped up a little bit more so you can see all of the techniques coming together in, 4 minutes instead of 8. One of the most satisfying but nerve-wracking parts is to get the edges and make sure whatever object you're painting blends into whatever object comes next. Too sharp of an edge looks unnatural, too blended of an edge looks, like it's a blurry camera. Blending edges together makes it very hard to paint in sessions because by the time you come back, there's an area that's dry and you can't blend the dry area into the wet one. It'd be ideal to paint the entire painting alla prima, but I have to eat, I have to sleep. It's a shame. So you can see I'm just doing the same thing on this panel as with the other one. I'm going in and I'm going with the highlights, then the midground, and then the lowlights. I'm using the same color palette as the other curtain, but this curtain has a little bit less blue in it. So I'm using more of the yellow-based highlights. This curtain also does not have wrinkles like the middle panel does. That is just accurate to how my curtains hang. I steamed all of them, but one of them didn't take to it as well. You can see here a lot of the work that I'm doing with blending in. I'm just trying to get that line pretty straight up and down. I don't want it too wavy, not in between the folds. The wavy line I really want to be blending in over the fold rather than dividing them. Once I blend the highlights and the lowlights together, it looks very, very smooth. So I am going to go back and just make it a little bit choppier. It looks a little ethereal right now. It's got a bit of a glow. So the first thing I do is darken those shadows in there and make the bottom a little choppier. Add some paint to the side, just for entertainment and totally not accidental. And here I am undoing all the choppiness in order to make the blend smoother. Push and pull. And there you have it. That is how I paint curtains. Hopefully you found this helpful. Hopefully you can take some tips, leave some others, and just try it yourself and really feel for yourself how the paint blends, and my tips will make a lot more sense if you have some experience in trying to blend fabric together. And that's all for this one. I'll see you next time, friend. Bye.